On July 5th, 2021, Rayo became the first person to beat Minecraft on a set seed in under 2 minutes. It was the culmination of tens of thousands of repeated attempts to whittle down the fastest known world seed to its bare components. The milestone of the sub 2 was seen by many, including the game's top runners, to be the last time a new minute barrier would ever be crossed. But as we now know, these predictions were a bit off the mark. The quest for taking times as low as possible never halted for even a second, and this persistence was rewarded with possibly the greatest discovery that Minecraft speedrunning has ever seen. But the journey to that point, as remarkable as it is also a bit lengthy, so please bear with me. We'll start about here. 6 seconds lower and 11 months removed from Rayo's first ever sub 2, and he was continuing his reign of terror in the set seed category. His 152, achieved on June 13th, marked his 9th set seed record since he entered the scene just over a year prior. Meanwhile, all other runners in that span account for a meager 10 records. But the unique thing about the 152 is that it was achieved on a seed that nobody even knew existed more than a week before Rayo's run. World seeds, as they're known, act as the string of numbers that generate a given Minecraft world, and this seemingly random assortment happened to correspond to the closest thing to perfection that the SSG community had seen up to this point, the Vine seed. The world itself looks rather unglamorous upon first inspection, a modestly sized village, sure, but nothing blatantly unique to start. To truly understand what makes this seed and the other ones that came before it fast enough to come anywhere close to the 2-minute mark, there's no better person to demonstrate than our very own set seed glitchless Goliath, Rayo. Though we'll be using his run to focus on the broad strokes instead of the many intricacies that are unique specifically to the Vine seed. Rayo is going to begin by scouring the village for resources, first by looting a house for a bed, which he needs 4 of in order to deal lethal explosion damage to the dragon, then he sneaks behind a blacksmith to rid it of obsidian, which he needs 20 of. After collecting beds 2, 3, and 4, he's met by a ruined portal that intersects a blacksmith house, giving him everything he needs to construct and light his gateway into the nether at just 33 seconds in. The nether in this run acts as a sort of express lane for runners, since 1 block traveled here equates to 8 blocks of distance in the overworld, so it doesn't take Rayo more than 30 seconds to get to the spot where he intends to build his return portal, a spot picked out because it'll transport him directly into the Stronghold's portal room. In any other conventional seed, Rayo would still need to craft Eyes of Ender so that he could light the end portal, but the Vine seed is one of a handful of seeds that comes pre-packaged with a portal that has all 12 eyes filled in already, a 1 in 1 trillion occurrence if not for the programs used to scout out seeds like this one, and with the resource collecting and travel time both out of the way now, all Rayo has to wait for is the dragon to swoop in diagonally to perch, and with the beds doubling as improvised explosives in the end, Rayo beats all of Minecraft in just 1 minute and 52 seconds. The ballet of countless perfect inputs performed on a seed that jumps from unremarkable to impossibly rare in just 60 seconds helps give us the blueprint for what the fastest set seed runs look like. First, a mad dash for resources in order to reach the stronghold and kill the dragon, followed by a journey through the nether to speed up the travel time to the fully filled end portal, followed by the dragon fight. This blueprint is the culmination of incredible optimizations in both seed finding and strategy development, but it also highlights the bottleneck for beating Minecraft any bit faster than Rayo did, as this blueprint has remained virtually unchanged since 12-eye portals were first used for set seed runs back in 2020. The biggest breakthrough since then was in finding a way to kill the Ender Dragon quickly, which manifested itself in the development of the bed bombing 1 cycle, but every major time cut since then has come from either a new world seed discovery or just plain optimization. So in reference to the earlier claims of the sub 2 as the last minute barrier of Minecraft, let's contextualize why those claims were made in the first place. If we try to visualize Rayo's run using its 3 distinct segments, overworld, nether, and end, we get something like this, with the 3 sections containing 1 block, or 1 second chunks that add up to a time of 152, 112 blocks in total. Now let's imagine a fanciful scenario where each of these 3 segments is lowered proportionally to each other to just barely cut below the 1 minute mark. What would that look like? This, a complete rewrite of what is thought to be possible. Is that even possible? What you're looking at is a tool-assisted speedrun by Technus, using manipulated luck and perfect inputs to visualize the absolute limit of Minecraft set seed. And despite making use of a dozen piglins bartering just what he needs, a route that slightly deviates from our own, and a questionably fast dragon purge, the task just barely scoots under the coveted final minute threshold to beat the game in 59 seconds. We can safely say that this is not the approach that would take humans to those same times. To do so requires something just as or even more revolutionary than the discovery of the one cycle, and to uncover a strategy so unlike anything seen before it, we have to look somewhere that's equally unforeseen. Not in one of the modern versions like Vineseeds 1.16, the few updates that came right before it, or any version recent enough to have a swimming animation. That's because the actual journey to Sub 1 begins with a set of versions that you likely don't remember much of, versions that will very soon mark a new era for Minecraft Set Seed, but for now are only known for being a brand new split on the official leaderboards, 1.9 to 1.12. Now, you might be wondering why these versions are grouped together in the first place, and why it's taken a full 5 years for this band of misfit updates to generate any interest in the speedrunning scene, and the answer to both of those questions can be found in the concept of the version split. Minecraft is no stranger to frequent updates, as each new version brings about new strategies, new optimizations, and of course new world records. But instead of just casting the older versions aside, dedicated groups of runners continue to optimize them. To simplify things for the purposes of leaderboards and record keeping, version splits form, which segment updates by major game changes that make them similar. For instance, Vineseed runs in 1.16 and Gravelseed runs done in 1.17 both fall into the bucket of the 1.16 plus category, with 1.16's Nether update overhauling the entire Nether dimension, introducing runners to ruin portals for the first time, and finally fixing the bug that made village chest loot random, all things that changed speedrunning in a big way. Going back a few updates makes things a bit less clear though. The 7 versions before 1.16 were all grouped in a sort of super category, bookended by both the aforementioned Nether update and by 1.9's combat update, which, fun fact, not only overhauled the entire dragonfight and combat systems, but was the first version where 12-eye portals could spawn naturally lit. The problem with this category split is that it was more of a haphazard grouping than a carefully crafted decision. The latter half of its updates, namely the versions following 1.13's update Aquatic, saw both the majority of the interest and the lion's share of the category's records. Our dum-dum group of 0.9 to 0.12 versions might have been grouped in with these updates, but they were a drastically different experience to run for several reasons, a fact which caused some prominent runners to advocate for a version split right down the middle. And on September 24th, it happened for both Random Seed and Set Seed, giving way for the 1.9 to 1.12 version split to be born. This on its own wouldn't have been much more than a novelty, but we have the unique opportunity to look at a group of versions that have been basically untouched by speedrunners. Even back when an update like 1.12 was the latest and greatest Minecraft had to offer, runners were still focused on the pre-1.9 versions, despite that era requiring a detour to craft Eyes of Ender. The first recorded run that would be retrospectively considered as part of the 0.9 to 0.12 category even has a note beside it on the world record history document, saying that it was really only the record because nobody thought to run these versions beforehand. And this was in early 2020, 3 years after the last version in the set, 1.12, was released. But with 3 more years removed from runs like that one, and we have to start off where they left off, which leaves us with the category's last vintage record, performed by I'm Honey, a 7-minute and 17-second completion of Minecraft 1.12 done in March of that same year. Considering the blueprint we saw earlier, how much different can this really be from today's runs? First, Honey makes his way to a sick-looking savannah village, which tracks with what we see in Rayo's run. But since these old villages don't have beds, Honey's here for different reasons. He trades with villagers for arrows, important for the entirely different end fight sequence coming up later, then he gathers his tools, important for obvious reasons, and after killing enough sheep to muster up 1 bedcraft, you'd think he's just about ready to make a nether portal so that he can shortcut his way to the stronghold. But he can't build a nether portal, he doesn't have the obsidian. Instead he has to make the entire 1500 block trek by foot in the overworld. This portion of the run takes up a bigger time slot than the entirety of Rayo's Sub 2, and as Honey reaches the stronghold and enters the end 5 minutes in, we're met with this version's most important distinction, which is that the dragon's perch mechanic is entirely different than the one we saw previously. This fact wasn't as important at the time, as a successful one cycle wouldn't be developed and used in any set seed run until 2 months later in 1.14, and no similar setups exist in these versions, leaving I'm Honey to dismantle the towers and battle the dragon during its purges. As the credits play, the roadblocks for making this version competitive are apparent in big bold letters. More prep required, a more tedious dragon fight, and a less than optimal world seed. So how are we going to fix these 3 things? Well, a category split is the perfect way to do that. There were more than 1,000 messages in the 0.9 to 0.12 channel during its first ever day on the SSG Discord server, and the first order of business was finding a new world seed to toy around with. Thankfully, the kind folks over at the Minecraft at Home Discord produced a list of 400,000 seeds with a 12-eye portal located somewhere in the first ring, which acts as a concentric area that is guaranteed to host 3 strongholds. In the process of refining this list of 400,000 down to something that can fit on a single page, we find a neat commonality between each of the seeds. Normally, like in the case of I'm Honey's run, the spawn point's great distance from the first ring causes a minutes-long trek to the stronghold, but these elect seeds cut to the chase and host spawn points more than 1,000 blocks from the center to end up inside the ring. The reason for this is actually pretty intuitive, as worlds that spawn with massive oceans in their center displace where the game puts the player's spawn point. Even better, or worse depending on your preferred version to speedrun, is that this was patched out in 1.13's update Aquatic, which obviously makes our versions of interest quite lucky, and marks the first step in the right direction for the category. Now it's just about finding the world with the most promise. And in the shopping list sized collection of remaining seeds, there's one world that demands more than just a surface level look at its features, no pun intended. That's because in it, it's noticed that a few blocks off of spawn are all that's between the player and a ravine that leads directly to the stronghold, and in particular, its library, making it possible to drop all the way down from the top of the ravine into its cobwebs. This sequence looked to save heaps of time compared to any of the other close stronghold seeds, but this idea was quickly shelved, after further analysis of the seed found no good way to quickly gather arrows or explosives, things absolutely necessary for the end fight. Instead, the seed was mainly used to set new records for the fastest end enter, and another seed, one dubbed the Darby seed, would enable runner Sprapple to achieve a time of 6 minutes and 45 seconds, the first record on 1.12 since I'm Honey's run. The Ravine seed would temporarily steal the spotlight after runner Luminosity found a way to make the route work in his 6-minute 15-second run, but an even more optimal seed, the Fiwi seed, saw a handful of runners work to take the category below 5 minutes. But in the midst of this back and forth between seed finding and route optimizations, a message was posted by a user named Slothlord with them sharing their own discovery. They had stunlocked the Ender Dragon? Wait, what does that entail? Normally, after the dragon perches, it'll leave that position after 50 units of damage are dealt, or if enough time elapses. But Slothlord's find had the dragon stuck above the fountain no matter what was done to disrupt it. And even stranger is that the dragon wasn't in its perch state, as evidenced by its slowly flapping wings and a strange resilience to bed damage. Crafterdark, the scene's most prominent glitch and strategy finder, saw all of this as a reason to investigate the phenomenon, hoping he could find a consistent way to both trip the softlock bug and kill the dragon. Using just the video Slothlord provided, Crafterdark was able to attribute the glitch to one somewhat well documented on the Mojang bug report board, with him proceeding to spend the next few days dissecting all of the many factors that impact the dragon's game state. But the much more compelling part of this investigation showed up when he pivoted to exploring the methods of killing the softlock dragon. Beds have no effect on the dragon in this state, so naturally Crafterdark had pivoted to 2 less explosive options. The first a sword, which worked as well as you could expect, and the second and more lucrative option, a bow. Crafterdark had figured that the bow shots would deflect like they normally do during the dragon's perch state, but he was pleasantly surprised to find that the arrows not only hit the softlock dragon, but for some reason, their damage became amplified. He then sprung forth with one of his paragraph-long responses attempting to explain the bug, and as soon as he felt content with the explanation he laid forth, he tested another bow shot, only this time it wasn't equivalent to a diamond sword like before, but instead dealt 100 damage. Crafterdark became ecstatic at the fact that, if the softlock could be replicated, the player might only need 2 to 3 arrows to take down the dragon now. He proceeded to put together a new potential explanation for why this trick could even be possible, but we'll have to get back to that, because after a bit more tinkering, Crafterdark returned to the 1.12 channel with his opus, proclaiming that he had killed the Ender Dragon in one hit, full health to dragon death, with one single arrow. CD's ongoing discussion before this was quite difficult to discern for anyone casually browsing the SSG Discord, but that one message, the one that represents the most important end fight discovery in Minecraft's history, immediately stood out as a beacon for anyone looking to crack the dragon fight once and for all. We had to know how this could be replicated. At the time that he first discovered the phenomenon, Crafterdark put out 2 hypotheses. The first focused on the dragon's tendency to launch objects rather fast when perched, assuming that's what it was doing here. Just instead of launching Endermen, it was launching arrows, back into itself. His second hypothesis then suggested that the dragon meshed its hitboxes together when in the softlock state, letting the arrows pass through multiple of them and creating an additive damage effect. This second idea gained traction as Crafterdark honed in on a specific spot on the dragon, this spike, with him pointing out in the Discord that this was the only area that could generate lethal damage with the bow shot. He had also noted that it was only possible when shooting from inside the dragon's hitbox, a task easy enough in creative, but questionable in the setting of survival mode. This component would be the main roadblock for getting the strat to work in set siege glitchless. For a time, Crafter Dark had tinkered with the idea of falling down into the dragon to time the bow shot before being hit, but that had limited success. The last contribution that Crafter Dark or anyone else would make for some time is in testing a route which let the dragon unperch from the center fountain, where it would then proceed to charge at the player, potentially giving them a window to hit the dragon's sweet spot during its attack. Some thought this wouldn't be possible outside of the dragon's softlock state, but this experiment proved otherwise, as a runner named Kaima would demonstrate when he took a quarter of the dragon's health away in a peaceful mode run. Easy difficulty, on the other hand, was still a can of worms, and we'd be a ways away from understanding how to get this to work in a full run using that difficulty, as enticing as the prospect is. For now, the project of implementing the one-shot got put on the back burner, and attention pivoted back to the softlock. With heaps of effort dedicated to cracking it, we found ourselves with a consistent strategy for real-time runs. It involves dying immediately upon entering the end, and then respawning as soon as this specific subtitle shows up, so you can unload the end as the dragon's over the fountain. Also, you can return back to the end to reap the benefits of a frozen-in-time dragon ripe for the killing. Previous Vineseed record holder Hanabi took the initiative to grind this strategy extensively, culminating in a time of 2 minutes 49 seconds on the Ravine Seed, where half of the run's entire duration is dedicated to swiping away at the dragon with an iron sword. Truly the pinnacle of set seed runs. Nonetheless, this was a monstrous time cut, with the softlock strategy serving as the biggest breakthrough for making 1.9 to 1.12 competitive, or at least it would have been, as the speedrun.com moderators took one glance at the softlock and very quickly determined it to be a glitch, rendering it ineligible from debuting on the main leaderboards. This was a bummer for the small but dedicated group of strategy finders and runners, and especially for Hanabi, who spent more than 34 hours grinding this one strategy only to come face to face with its mod-induced obsolescence. 34 hours of course being a ridiculous amount to put into any run, and a figure that will likely never be topped in any subsequent grind mentioned in this story. That's like 21.5 viewings of A Bug's Life. It was apparent that the softlock was just asking to be labeled a glitch, even upon its initial discovery, but the lack of communication by the moderators up until its denouncement left the version speedrunners quite directionless. After a few weeks of inactivity in December, interest did return, slowly but surely, ringing in the new year with the new record and the new, and first, 1.9 to 1.12 one cycle. Well, it wasn't actually new at the time of Loth's record. The Shield cycle, as it was known, had been in development all the way back in October by a runner named Tel52, but the softlock, rest in peace, took all of the spotlight away from it at the time. The stupid good blocking ability of the shield leads the dragon to get stuck in place upon its perch attempt, letting the player cycle through a few beds to promptly eviscerate the blocky Sky Serpent. This one optimization halved the duration of the end fight, which didn't cut much from the world record in the seed that Loth ran, but would once a more optimal seed was successfully routed, as Kaima became the first person to achieve a sub-3 glitchless run in the category with a 247 on March 5th. Comparing the splits to where we started with I'm Honey's run tells the full story, as each portion of the run got more optimized, the resource collecting and travel thanks to the new seed discoveries, and the dragon fight because of the shield cycle. From this point though, runners became bored with the experience the category had to offer, as players trailed off and returned to the other, more popular versions. March was a dormant month for new records and runs after the first week's hot start. On April 4th, Kaima figured it was time to shake things up, and he did this by running some one-shot attempts in peaceful mode. He had a few close calls back in October during a 6-hour grind, bringing about current ambitions of rekindling interest. What he didn't expect was that, 5 hours in, he'd managed to do this. A 148, just like that. Now of course it wasn't up for contention on the main leaderboards, but this run did something that none of the other runs before it had managed. It caused a ton of commotion, especially about whether or not the one-shot could also be considered a glitch, just like its predecessor the softlock was. That's a contentious topic that's worth bringing up in better detail later, but the other portion of the discussion started to put 2 and 2 together. The one-shot is faster for the end fight, and with its requirement of just a bow and an arrow, could see the player in the end faster than any of the one-cycle setups. The only thing standing in the way of an easy difficulty 150, 140, 130, or who knows how low, is the fog that obscures every aspect of the one-shot. We still didn't know why the dragon could spit out 200 damage arrows in the first place. But at the same time that all this discussion was going on, a completely different glitch discovering Goliath would proceed to blow the entire case of the one-shot mystery wide open. Circuit is known for absolutely destroying the game by means of tool-assisted runs, where sequences of pre-programmed inputs push the game beyond what a human can normally pull off. Her task runs focus on anything she can condense into a bite-sized playthrough, and years of messing around with Minecraft's inner workings made her one of the best at understanding the technical side of the game. This set her up as the ideal person to figure out how to harness the power of the one-shot, though Circuit's investigation started out entirely independent of anything going on in the SSG community. Her first public find was on March 11th, where on her alternate YouTube channel she detailed an odd quirk about dragon-derived knockback, citing that it's entirely determined by the player's proximity to a tiny region in its hitbox center. This is the same spot CrafterDark pointed out a while back, but now we have a visual of its size and location, as well as a silly nickname, the tickle spot. This mechanic would be subsequently used by Circuit to demonstrate what the math of calculating infinite knockback could do to crumble a server. It would take 2 months for Circuit to follow up this lone discovery, but she did so with a flurry of new one-shot breakthroughs. On May 28th, her second find used tool-assisted inputs to brute force the dragon kill by shooting directly into its tickle spot. The numbers on the left finally give us an answer to why the one-shot is capable of dealing such ridiculous damage in the first place. First, the dragon's horizontal knockback builds up for the player in the form of server-side velocity, which is distinctly different from client-side velocity, the one the player actually experiences. An arrow shot from a bow during this rapid buildup picks up the properties of the server velocity, which at the speed generated in the tickle spot is faster than the orbital velocity of the International Space Station, far more than is sufficient to kill the Ender Dragon. This proof of concept might have been tool-assisted, but her next find wouldn't be, as on June 9th, Circuit used a zero-cycle practice map, an end-fight simulator for a fancy 1.16 dragon kill method, to instead line herself up and demolish the dragon with a well-timed bow shot, becoming the first person to do so in the easy plus difficulty, even if just on a practice map. This achievement was built off of the backbone of extensive research by Circuit, including the simulation of thousands of dragons spinning away in the end. This testing produced stunning visuals, with the graphs confirming that the pathing of the dragon had several spots that converged with one another, marking places the player could potentially line themselves up with. This was the key to unlocking a consistent setup, or as Circuit put it, turned the potential of doing this in a full game run from impossible to almost feasible. In early July, Circuit put these simulations to work by focusing on the way the dragon circles and promptly targets a specific and predictable point, though the setup she came up with was still a bit too complicated for set seed runs. Kaima saw a few similarities to what he had been doing, promptly chiming in to suggest she take a look at 1.12 and 1.12's Ravine Seed. The logic is all the same here, except Kaima is taking advantage of the way the dragon targets the player post-purge, doing it on the ground without the need to ender pearl up to a pillar. Circuit liked this simplified method. At the very end of the month, in a 1-2 punch, Circuit uploaded the most groundbreaking videos to date, for not just the one-shot, but the entire history of players attempting to tame the beast that is the Ender Dragon boss fight. On July 31st, she topped Kaima's record with a peaceful run of 1 minute 37 seconds done on the Ravine Seed. But on August 3rd, she crossed into the category that has been out of reach for the entirety of this saga, producing a setup that in her attempt knocked out more than 2/3 of the dragon's damage. In easy mode, on set seed, no practice map here. Circuit has the corner of a block precisely align the dragon's charge to a second spot a block lower, where she can tank one dragon hit to directly cross paths with its tickle spawn. With the help of a bit of timing, this proof of concept had made history. It would be the strategy to hoist set seed into the new age. Unfortunately for Circuit though, she wouldn't be the one to finish the job. An obligation saw her away from Minecraft for some time, and the torch would have to be passed on to whoever could adapt the setup she provided, turning it into a run that dealt the full extent of damage. But she had done enough to make the gravity of her discovery so apparent that the 1.12 community knew they had to push on in achieving a completed one-shot run. The caveats Circuit laid out were also apparent. Standing in the corner of a block can only be so precise, as the dragon's charge still has so much variation that can't actively be accounted for. Her setup only gets properly aligned with the tickle spot 3.8% of the time, and even that figure is based off of the dragon instantly perching, pegged at a 30% chance. And to top it all off, you have to be tick perfect with the bow shot, and even then, everything going right, 50% of runs that are shot perfectly into the tickle spot simply don't transfer the velocity to the arrow. None of this deterred the remaining group of SSG runners. There had coincidentally been an ongoing battle on a shield cycle seed at this time, which culminated in a 226 by a runner named Ensla, so the energy to pivot into a grind as daunting as the one-shot was abundant and at the ready. Close calls on good pace began to roll in, as well as a few routing optimizations. Circuit and others, using what else but the Ravine Seed, had been obtaining bows by breaking cobwebs in the library and arrows by means of crafting them. but it dawned on a few players that they could grab a weapon from a stronghold chest to then use on a skeleton, banking on the 5% chance that it drops both of these items for you. This would further limit the amount of one-shot attempts a player could do, substantially, but since it had the potential to be faster, much faster, it became the standard. The 3rd of August came and went, giving us a large sample size of attempts from across the community, yet there remained a big uncertainty in how long it would take, with the collective effort of attempts, for one player to break through. In the waning hours of August 4th, Hanabi, a player who has popped up in every corner of this graph, found himself on the verge of calling it quits for the night after a 4 hours grind turned up nothing. Upon resetting, Hanabi does the sequence he's burned into muscle memory for hours up to this point. Drop down to this spot, dig through a patch of grass and 3 dirt to position himself, careen through the ravine into the cushion of a cobweb, and then snag a sword from the stronghold chest. A skeleton on the fringes of the ravine takes him out of this rigid routine, and as he turns to kill it in 3 quick swipes, he finds exactly what he's looking for. This is not a one-off occurrence for him, but the rarity of the drops makes his end entries with a bow and arrow quite sparse, only seeing about 2 to 3 of these every hour. At the very least, it's a nice change of scenery. He preps the initial setup as memorized, only to look up and see the dragon perching before his very eyes. The best he can do now is wait for the dragon to leave its post and meet him lined up on the ledge a block below, hoping he can time the arrow right, and especially hoping that the timing will even matter. Upon taking the shot, the immediate indicator of where his arrow went, if it hit the right spot at the right time, it lights up. He takes a moment to pause. All of the practice and theory crafting months in the making has led him to this moment. The dragon's health depleted, its corpse in the dying animation, all at 53 seconds, which is a pretty respectable time to be entering the end by set seed standards. But he hasn't just entered the end. He's come into the dragon's home and destroyed it, all with one arrow, with just mere seconds between his otherworldly achievement and a waltz into the end fountain to claim his stake at Minecraft speedrunning history. This victory lap represents the collective catharsis of everyone involved in this great, indescribable project. The ridiculous versions, the goofy old ender dragon, the absurd lengths players went to give this category a fighting chance, all combining in one run, done by Hanabi in the waning hours of August 4th, to take Minecraft speedrunning into the future. 1 minute, 9 seconds. The new Minecraft set seed world record by 37 seconds. On one hand, this achievement is unprecedented, and the reaction by the top runners perfectly encapsulates how truly ridiculous this feat is. On the graph it just looks like a complete aberration. But on the other hand, this felt like just the beginning, the ground floor for a project that would have been laughed at not even 24 hours ago. We're 9 seconds away from the 1 minute mark. There's really only 2 components of the run that can be optimized from this point, pathing to the 12-eye portal and the one-shot setup. For now, the latter is something beholden to just circuit and circuit only, so runners quickly got to discussing if there was anything that could be done to shave a few seconds in the stronghold. Kaima had already found an optimization in routing, even before Hanabi's run, where he opted to loot the better positioned pickaxe chest to grab his weapon of choice for killing that skeleton. This has notable advantages, but also drawbacks compared to the sword. To start, this chest is much closer to the portal room, which saves several crucial seconds and provides more linear routing. But you also have to contend with the cooldown time and reduced damage of the pickaxe, requiring 4 critical hits instead of a quick 3 like with the sword. This is especially painful when one or multiple other mobs spawn alongside the skeleton, because they'll do everything they can to mess up your aim and pathing as you flail around with the pickaxe. And if that struggle takes you below 3.5 hearts, well sorry, the dragon says you can't see a run to completion now. These were the exact reasons why the pickaxe route hadn't been adopted yet, but like with the one-shot, Kaima helped set the groundwork as he showed with a 20-second end enter, 3 seconds faster than in Hanabi's completed run. By the end of the 5th, all the top names in Set Seed, Rattles, Ensla Magnetic, and many others were lining up to face the one-shot slot machine. If they were to go by Hanabi's estimated odds of completing a full run, that being 1 in every 25,000 attempts, those chumps would be here a while. But then Rattles just straight up said nah and hit the one shot no later than 1 hour into her session.
Oh my god, what?
Yeah, the one shot felt like a slot machine alright. The tenor of this early Wild West phase can be characterized by the feeling that any run with an end enter had potential to make history, and that sentiment was for the most part true. The criteria for end enters got a bit more strict with the new world record on the 6th in the form of a 1 minute 7 second run by Ensla, the culmination of 20 hours worth of resets to boast a time cut of 2 seconds. This was about the time that the best runners figured the pickaxe route was the way to go. Thanks in part to the tedious resetting it induced, the Stronghold sequence was practiced to near perfection. A player by the name of Quiblington showed off a 6/17 second end enter with the pickaxe route, and there was no looking back. End enters were still pouring in, but the output of successful runs stood limited to no more than a trickle. 5 different runners saw their one-shot attempts go to completion, which is quite promising for being just a few days into the grind, but it felt like not much more than a byproduct of the massive influx of runners. It's not like any one player could get fortunate enough to see enough ends in insta-purchase to fluke their way to more than one. What's that? Rattles hit the one-shot for a second time, just a day after she first hit it? Huh. It was attempts like this that emboldened the scene with a sense of mysticism behind any given end enter. Runs were being characterized as choked simply because they got to the one-shot at record pace, but failure is quite literally the default mode of this setup. And what did Circuit think about all of this? Well, she wasn't enthralled about missing out on the chance of setting a record, but she was eager to further optimize the dragon fight. Through an addition to the description of her one-shot setup vid and a response to Kaima, "Hey Kaima, how's it going Kaima?" it's apparent that Circuit had setups in mind that could shave seconds, by way of finding paths which had the dragon both unperching and reaching the player quicker. Circuit also implored runners to stick with the pickaxe route, as it could be used to dig out some nifty setups in the near future, once she was back home from vacation. Nonetheless, the collective gunning for a shot at the record trudged on, though now with the knowledge in the back of their minds that the current one-shot setup would become obsolete faster than even the softlock. The glory of being a part in the inevitable Sub-1 project was the main driver, at least for now. One particular runner by the name of Rox was among the group opting away from the wait-and-see game. He was one of the first to grind the setup Circuit pioneered, and his approach to the grind was nothing short of methodical in nature. Rox found himself on a hot streak just a few days after Ensla's run, achieving a low 17 bow and arrow end enter, which was a new record, along with a hypothetical 16.1, practically 101 pace if the skeleton cooperated. He pushed his average end enter below the threshold needed to output a record, and on quite the average enter, he saw his grind pay off in one fell swoop.
Yes, dude.
It may have taken him nearly 44 hours, or the equivalent of watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy 4 times in a row, but his efforts paid off handsomely with his very own record. Now if only he could have some time to relax and maybe kick his feet up with the title of world record holder. Guess not. Yes, Circuit is back in town and had clearly been itching to improve upon her initial work. The new variant operates under the same ideas as the old one, set up at point A for the dragon to target an eventual point B, have the dragon align itself with the help of terrain features such as the obsidian pillar in its way, and hope the bow gods and their bow odds are in your favor. Only this time Circuit presented along with the setup a 5% chance of damage requirements being met, as well as a time save of 3 seconds compared to version 1, which opened the door for any end enter at 23 seconds or lower to have a shot at the record. And there were plenty of shots done with this new position right from the get-go, though this time around they came with a greater air of uncertainty. Circuit had hinted at the findings in the 5% shot giving way for faster and higher confidence setups in the near future, though nobody knew when that future would be. It's an odd feeling doing attempts for a run that you know will be obsolete sometime down the road, and that absurdity translated into the attempts we were seeing. Everything outside of the one-shot itself was elevated, the random oddities seen in the Stronghold, the weird ways the dragon would throw the player about. If you were lucky enough to tune into some of the top runners' live streams, you would have seen the real-time transformation from monotony of the resetting to a full-on acceptance of it. In one quick go, for instance, Rattle's stream went from business as usual to oh hello sensory overload, which I guess in a way alludes to how close the record was to becoming compacted into a YouTube Shorts upload. The bow gods must have been focused in with the help of the Subway Surfers footage, as the reward of the journey became the reward of Rattle's hitting the one-shot to lower the record by 2 seconds. All it took was a little brain rot to go along with it. Rattles wasn't too happy with the mistakes made in the Run Stronghold segment, but to her credit, this was still the fastest end enter out of any record, boasting a time of 19.4 seconds. This record felt like the first instance where the allure of a new record was outmatched by the sheer amount of time needed to churn out such a run. Did runners really want to invest all of that time when a new setup was likely looming right behind it? Not really, said a few, and so they sat this one out for a bit. That left the remaining group, nothing but suckers for pain and torment, including myself, as I chimed in with a neat little bingo card to keep runners entertained through the perpetual reset treadmill. Note some of the ridiculous oddities: zombies dropping rare loot, a group of 6 or more mobs, a big slime messing up a run, all infinitely more common than a successful one-shot. While I was busy coming within inches of a second place finish, the actually competent folks are working on the next big thing, and by folks I once again mainly mean Circuit. The ongoing doldrums were a chance to take a step back and look at the big picture. The sum of best, combining the fastest stronghold plus end splits, had us at a painful 1 minute flat. So naturally, the idea of that inevitable new setup Circuit was talking about made the rounds once again, and suddenly the ball was back in her court. On August 16th, Circuit published a video detailing how changing player render distance would create two distinct Ender Dragon spawn orientations, citing that the one currently going unused, Yaw-37, had the potential to see the dragon perch 0.7 seconds faster than the Yaw-227 variant currently in use. This did push the potential sum of best below a minute, but the added inconsistency Yaw-37 produced made Circuit advise away from it. But there was one more thing, a component that Circuit would go on to say was embarrassing to have overlooked. The dance between the player and Ender Dragon reaches the desired conclusion when the dragon sets up for a perch attempt. But before it can do this, the dragon is coded to fly opposite to the player, so long as there is a player in range. If there's no player in range, the dragon has nothing to fly opposite to, and immediately perches. Naturally, Circuit wanted to figure out this range, and if the player could exit it to initiate a perch, but unfortunately its default radius was just too big to do anything with, which is what deterred her from exploring this earlier. She needed a way to reduce the radius, and as it turned out, the solution for this had been sneakily hiding in plain sight all this time. That's because, well, sneaking on its own reduced the radius of the detection box by 20%, coincidentally putting its outer bounds at the very edge of the Obsidian spawn platform. This was all Circuit needed, and on August 19th, she published her findings, citing not only how to replicate what she had found, but accompanying it with the proposition of an 8-second time save. The reaction from the community was unanimous. The next setup, the first engineered to harness this new find, would be the one to take Minecraft speedrunning below the 1 minute mark. You might be surprised to find that at this point in the category's progression, with thousands of collective hours poured into 2 different one-shot setups, patience was undeniably at a premium. Days passed with relative silence, as every would-be sub-1 contender periodically checked Circuit's YouTube as well as the Discord for any updates, eagerly waiting for the next big thing. The days trudged on, with the one caveat being a 0.2 second time cut by runner at Turtle, but aside from some congratulatory remarks, the scene stayed mostly silent, until... With the ball in Circuit's court for well over a week, she returned with nothing short of a grand slam. Shift for just under 3 seconds at the edge of the Obsidian platform, do the 1-2 shenanigan at a new spot, and reap the benefits of the greatest setup for the greatest discovery in Minecraft speedrunning history. That was all there was left to do, and attempts started to pour in as the sub-1 race promptly ensued. Multi-streams featuring the best runners popped up, with a great debate around who could possibly be the one to make history. Maybe it would be a former record holder like Rattles, Hanabi, Rox, or Ensla. Maybe someone completely unexpected like Fulham or previous RSG record holder Brentilda. All that was certain was the sheer intensity that accompanied every close call. Just an hour in, Hanabi took 90% of the dragon's health away, mere blips of dragon positioning from an all but certain sub-1. All Pathfinders like Crafter Dark and Circuit could do was sit back and watch the madness unfold right in front of them. The sheer amount of attempts to the one-shot fueled the anticipation in the air as the excitement with each new end-enter mounted. With the greatest volume of runs and end-enters since that very first setup in early August, we knew the sub-1 dam would burst wide open soon enough, but who would be the lucky runner to see it through? Well, a little less than 5 hours after the new setup dropped, Hanabi figured we had waited long enough when he pulled off this historic run.
Sub-1, let's fucking go! Let's fucking go! Let's go! Sub-1! Yes! Yes!
He had been only one of a few to contest Rayo in 1.16. He devoted countless hours to a strategy that wouldn't even be up for leaderboard contention. He produced the single largest time cut set seed speedrunning had seen in years. And now, Hanabi had defeated what was thought to be Minecraft's impossible final minute barrier. This was not something he could have done alone. Without the big fuss Crafter Dark made what seems like forever ago about the one-shot, Kaima's persistence and seeming disregard for what was said to be achievable, Circuit's endless toils with the dragon and its many oddities, and of course, the help of countless others, all of this would have been just a fanciful what-if scenario. Hanabi's 56-second time marked a grand finale to the tiresome sub-1 journey, but there was still more to be told about the one-shot. Like, was it ever determined to be a glitch or not? Long story short, the mechanic behind the one-shot was rationalized by the Minecraft speedrunning moderators as simply the most extreme usage of an entirely intended game mechanic, that being the dragon's knockback interaction with the player. That means, as Loth put it to me, that the one-shot is not a glitch that would promptly be banned, but instead an exploit, and I completely agree with this. The official leaderboard shortly corroborated this sentiment, as our intrepid 1.12 runners were finally etched into the history books. From here, the one-shot became widespread. 1.16 might have been bumped from the first place version spot, but they too get a taste of the now officially legal strategy. Before she moved on to 1.12, Circuit put forth the idea of the perch one-shot, with big time strat finder T-Wags being the first to hit it in a real-time run, demonstrating that only the head hitbox of the dragon could push around the player while perched. The strategy further evolved until we were left with this setup, which through the statistics menu moves the game forwards a tick at a time until a perfect bow shot can be placed. It's much more complicated than that, but evidently this method gave way to 1.16's own renaissance, with the current record by low-key sitting at 1 minute and 36 seconds. The back and forths in 1.12 didn't stop either. Hanabi learned to create his own post-perch setup, debuting it in the 53-second run, which, most importantly, did not feature a 1-second time loss to a dirt block like in his first sub-1 run. Sorry, Hanabi. Remember when I jokingly called his 34-hour softlock endeavor excessive? Well, Nihilus took that personally, spending 317 hours grinding Hanabi's own setup to produce a rather impressive time of 52.7 seconds, a record which stands to this day. On June 13th, 2024, the Tricky Trials update was released, featuring not only the titular trial chambers, but within them, the rare chance to receive the Heavy Core, which when crafted into the mace weapon boosts damage based off of fall height, letting players one-hit any mob they can conceive of, including the Ender Dragon. This might be Minecraft's official one-shot item, but tucked away in versions that are quickly becoming ancient history, and the most obscure spot you could look is the game's unofficial one-shot. It might not have the flash or mystique of the mace, or even be possible to replicate beyond 1.16, but this one trick, once thought to be humanly impossible, hosts along with it one of the greatest breakthroughs the game has ever seen. A breakthrough whose story and legacy will never be forgotten.